Hey everybody, how you doing tonight? It's been about 2 months since the pandemic formally began, and I know it's difficult. Um, yeah, I don't want to trivialize that or kind of encourage anybody to have to go deeper into the pained body right now. But at the same time, I know that we're really pushed up against it, because there's just so much stuff that comes up in the heart of this. And so I want to talk about, in relation to that, I want to talk about a post I wrote a little while ago, and I put it up recently on Facebook and got a bit of pushback, as I often do when I write about grounded spirituality, because the whole patriarchal spiritual tradition is antithetical to my belief system. So I want to read this to you and just talk about it. I think it's a really interesting question. What is now? What does it mean to be in the now? What does it mean to be present? In grounded spirituality, where I took this question on very deeply, um, I have a line in the Truth is the Gateway to the Moment chapter, because for me, when I could live in truth, that seemed to open me to a deeper experience of the moment. In the dialogues with Michael, I say true presence is a whole being experience, one that includes everything we left behind on the path. Okay, so true presence is a whole being experience. So, and what does it mean to be a whole being? Again, the same question. So let me just read this post to you and then talk about it a bit and leave it with you to think about or feel into or all of that. So here's the post. Be here now. We can't. We have too much trauma in the way. The power of now sounds good, but first we have to deal with the power of then. Worst things first. It's easy enough to talk about being in the now, but what are we even talking about? Now through the mind, through the heart, through the body? What does it even mean to be fully present? Many of the people teaching nowness are head tripping, meditation addicted spiritual bypassers. What do they really know about presence? The truth is that we're all trauma survivors, and that includes every spiritual teacher I've ever known. Almost every one of them has confused self-avoidance with enlightenment, blaming the mind for all that ails them while conveniently sidestepping their wounded hearts. Bottom line, we can't be in the present because our emotional and physical body are tied up in trauma knots. Some, many, perhaps all threads of consciousness are still back there, locked into the originating wounds. If we want to truly be here now, we have to be there then. We have to untie the knots and heal the core wounds. Then, and only then, will we know the true power of now. Close quote. So, clearly I'm saying that, I critically review Eckhart Tolle's book, Power of Now, in Grounded Spirituality for about 8 or 10 pages, because his story of, he's sort of suicidal, carrying a lot of stuff, and one night all of a sudden becomes enlightened, just doesn't wash with me. Certainly he may have experienced a form of nowness, whether it's a witness observer version of now that's not very energized in the body, or a cerebral version of now. But for me, and I guess this is my bias as somebody who worked with Alexander Lowen in bioenergetics, is that an experience of the now has to really encompass and be energized in all aspects of the human experience. So the mind is certainly alive, vital, and charged, but so is the body, and so is the emotional body. So a lot of times you'll see with a lot of spiritual teachers who talk about the now, they're real flatlined. They're like kind of like automatons. And that's not any version of now that I want much to do with. I mean, it serves a purpose, it gives you some distant detachment from your stuff. But when I have felt the most in the now, all aspects of me are vital, alive, connecting, weaving. My spirited body is vital and energized like Alexander Lowen's was. My mind is sharp and focused. I'm connected to my soul's calling and my soul's journey in a very individuated way, right? So for me, the irony of many of the so-called non-dual teachings, Advaita movement, I call it the avoided movement, is that they're talking about getting into the present, but they're nullifying so much of the human experience, the story, the feelings, the ego gets bashed. Even the healthy ego doesn't even matter. I mean, it's, you know, the body often. So what are they even talking about? Some kind of sort of actually ironically egoic, cerebrally superior, witness observer oriented version of the now? That doesn't really feel like the now to me. That feels like a really convenient experience of the now, one that's painless and disembodied and disconnected. But what does it mean to really be in the now? Um, and can we be in the now if we're still holding on to all kinds of individual trauma loops, unresolved material, memories, patterns and issues that emanate from them, unsaid words, unscreamed acts of rebellion for situations we've been through that are now stored, somatized within the physical body, affect the way we breathe, shallowing our breath as children, because if we breathe too deeply, we felt too much. The whole system starts to get contained and corrupted and fragmented and not really moving in a fluid weave the way it was intended to. So could that be the now if we're in that state? And what about collective and ancestral trauma? What role does that play in this whole question of what does it mean to be in the now? If I'm carrying forward all kinds of generational stuff, which affects the way that I live in my body, my access to my feelings, my access to the moment as a result. Like if I'm going to go into the now from a purely cerebral perspective, like a head tripper version of the now, well, I can get into the now real fast. I can get into the now right now with you. But if I want to really be in the now, where all of these aspects, these beautiful aspects of what it means to be human are at the table, interacting and interfacing with each other, serving their true purpose as part of the human field, then I think it's a lot more complicated to be here now and to truly know the power of now. Because my bias would be that person would be kind of like Alexander Lowen was in many ways, like very energized, kind of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, sharp, aware of their localized reality and environment, necessarily vigilant, but not over vigilant unless it was required, aware of their practical responsibilities, the relationships that matter to them, aware of a more unified field, but always coming from the self as the premise for that experience, not leaving the self, not bashing the self, not removing the self from the equation. Here for all of it, true presence as a whole being experience. So I feel like this whole question of what does it mean to be in the now, in the spiritual world, we haven't even really begun to address it. Because we've been fed this karmic bill of goods from patriarchal spirituality and the New Age movement for years that really fixates on like the overdevelopment of a singular thread of consciousness. So you're a master meditator, or you're a master witness observer, or you're a master of premature forgiveness. But you're not developed in all kinds of other ways. In fact, you've nullified many of those other pathways of possibility in order to perfect that one singular thread of consciousness. And that may be how you make your living, and then then how you build a following and how you become known as a guru, because you can do that one thing amazingly well. But so that's fine. But that's not the power of now. That's not be here now, I mean, I knew Ram Dass. I made Carmageddon with Ram Dass. I had many conversations with him. And parts of him felt very intact and present, and other parts of him didn't. So was he being here now? I mean, I know that, that was a term that he loved because it reminded him to come back into the moment to the best of his abilities. But was he in the now? Was he always in the now? Are any of us really always in the now in this dissociated world? And what would that look like? What would the newly embodied being look like if they were in their nowness and in their presence and interfacing? Like right now, you're watching me talk to you. So if you were fully in the now, how would you receive this? How would you receive me? Where would your breath be? Where would your consciousness be? Where would your heart consciousness be? Where would you be in your hips? Where would you be in your feet? Where would you be of your feet? When I would work with Al Lowen in therapeutic sessions, I think that was one of the closest I came, perhaps, to a full presence experience. And it was really through the intensification and excavation of my emotional holdings and the releasing of that material in a very activated way. So at the end of it, I felt as though I had somehow um, pushed through my fragmentation and brought a lot of those threads of my consciousness and my history, and perhaps ancestral history, into this holy weave of experience. So when I would leave that office, I felt more intact, more present, more unified, not just all oneness, unity, consciousness, floaty magoo stuff, but an experience of unity consciousness that was emanating from a feeling, an experience of being unified within my body. I felt unified like a little child before the world gets to us and our armor goes up. And that felt real close to presence as a whole being experience, what I call enrealment and grounded spirituality. So if you're interested in this question, feel free to check out Grounded Spirituality. I spent a whole book pretty much on this question, or at least the first two parts of it. Um, and just think about it and feel into it. And and I guess the bigger question is, or the simpler question in a way is, where do we ask this question from within us? If I ask it from my mind, what answer do I get? If I ask it from my heart, what answer do I get? If I answer it from the brain and the belly that Philip Shepherd talks about in his brilliant books, Radical Wholeness, which I recommend to you highly, in New Self, New World. If I ask the question, what does it mean to truly be here now? From the belly of the beast, what's the answer I get? You know, what do my feet have to say about this? What do the bones of your being have to say about this? We know what the mind says, mind, head tripping mind. It's very clear what it is to be here now, but that ain't the whole story. We want to really be here now. We got to bring every part of us to the table. Anyway, thanks for listening. Take care.